Triumph Bonneville and the winners of countless prizes in the past.
The 32-year-old Irish farmer, number 12, is seen refueling. Riding the only Triumph in the race, he's taken the lead and he held it all the way, lap after lap.
Once British motorcycles ruled the world and had sales to match. Now the home-based industry is a struggling enterprise in the Midlands. Triumph at Meriden near Coventry. It's only survived so long thanks to the decision by Tony Benn in 1975 to establish the company as a workers' cooperative. Since then it's struggled along. Its UK-based competitors fallen by the wayside, and even the Japanese, who hold 95% of the British market, having their problems. In these difficult conditions, Triumph is trying to relaunch itself as a new company with a new product. For the last year, we've followed the trials and tribulations of the Meriden cooperative in its fight for survival.
The characters in this drama are a mixed bunch. The softly-spoken Midlander, John Rosamond, and his ebullient Belfast-born colleague, Bill Beattie. They're the leaders among the Meriden men, as is Harry Hughes, a sort of unofficial Cassandra figure. Then there's local politician Geoffrey Edge, who has the power to make or break the cooperative. And from the City of London, Michael Jordan, whose late intervention could tip the balance one way or the other. As the deadline approaches, here's Nick Clark's special report, Triumph or Disaster.
Some time now, a matter of something like 12, 13 months, things have been going on, as it were, towards a new model, something that we've all dreamed of. Now, I'm going to ask Brian Jones, if he would, to unveil, on my right-hand side, the new engine. Takes your breath away, doesn't it? That new engine forms a fundamental part of our future.
Every Triumph worker knows, however, that when one door opens, another seems to close. On the day they unveiled their first new engine for 20 years, they heard their factory would have to be sold. Meriden's motto could be, first the good news, then the bad. From the start of the long Triumph campaign, it was clear that there'd been no easy victories. It took 18 months of picketing and a fortuitous change of government before the idea of a cooperative looked remotely likely to succeed. But the men were driven on by a special personal involvement.
It was the people that dug it out of the rubble in Coventry after the Blitz and remade it, built it, got this factory going, and put their lives into it. That's what they invested in, is their livelihoods. And when you were speaking of people that had worked in an industry, as long as these people have, and had given everything to it, everything they could invest in, which was their skills, to make whatever drawings design came up with a reality, I think they had a pretty good stake in the company. And I think they wanted that company to go on. What I didn't think they wanted, and they proved they didn't want, was somebody to come up from London, spend 20 minutes with them, telling them that they were no longer required.
But when Mr. Benn waved his magic wand and conjured up the funds which brought the cooperative to life, Meriden's problems were only just beginning. For one thing, the men inherited a factory which had been starved of investment. And then there was money. Meriden lurched from one financial crisis to the next. Starting on the day it wrote its first cheque and ran straight into the red.
In effect, the initial loan of £4.2 million plus £750,000 grant, 90% of it, well 95% of it, went in the acquisition of the manufacturing rights to recommence production. So very little money ever came into the Triumph Co-op. The cooperative never had a chance, never had an opportunity to function in a normal way. The pundits were right. The company should have folded.
But at the last moment, some act of bounty or a surprise order always saved the day. Once the Nigerian police force wanted 1,000 bikes at the drop of a hat, and the factory worked without pay round the clock before going back onto short time. It was as if some mischievous fairy godmother was controlling Meriden's fate, deciding arbitrarily when the next payday would be.
When people come to work, basically what they're coming for is to earn a living. when you have got the responsibilities of wife, kids, family, mortgage, whatever, and you're not even sure that week after you've been your work, you're going to get your wages. You can't even plan a week ahead. You can't plan holidays like normal people would be able to do. That's what you're putting into the place, and that's what they're putting into it.
Between crises, Meriden was still producing bikes. The Bonneville model, though long in the tooth, had a faithful following. The United States was by far the most important market, so when the pound's value started to rise sharply, hurting British exports, the effect was to threaten Triumph with another financial pile-up. This time, as disaster loomed once more in late 1980, it was the Conservative government which, to everyone's surprise, donned the fairy godmother disguise. £9 million of debts would be written off, but at a price. In future, Triumph would not qualify for export credit guarantees, and that more or less scuppered their vital American market.
This is the position. Here we have a new beginning for Triumph. Do you wish to be part of it? You know, rather than go cap in hand as we tend to have to at this moment in time because of the problems, past problems, might one say.
By the start of 1981, the worker directors were on their own, with an empty slate and a perilously empty order book. In commercial terms, their day-to-day problems were horrendous. But despite the need to resolve such basic questions as whether they could afford the parts for the next day's production, they also cherished an impossible dream: a new Triumph to succeed the old Bonnie.
With the ceiling in this area?
Yeah.
John Rosamond became the chairman in 1977, only the second man to hold the post.
Before Christmas, yes. And then we ran into this sort of major problem. Until we stripped the thing right down, we couldn't see what had gone wrong.
38-year-old Rosamond is a welder by trade. His election was a compromise because he doesn't belong to either of the two main unions. He's quietly spoken, solid and reasonable. His right-hand man, Bill Beattie, brings nervous energy and passion to the partnership. He's in charge of production matters when there's any producing to be done. At 40, he's been with Triumph for 19 years.
Speaking from my own experience, I certainly have a lot of doubts and worries about why I'm doing this thing and is it worthwhile? Because I know the sort of sacrifices that I'm asking my family to make to continue this struggle.
It's Beattie and Rosamond who, against the advice of the cooperative's professional managers, pushed through the plans for a new bike and a new engine. It might not have looked much, but they believed the project would eventually justify or consign to the junk heap all the years of cooperative effort.
Looks good, Brian. Does it, I know it's not all there, but does it give you enough information?
Brian Jones had the anxious task of nurturing the infant engine. He's now engineering director at Meriden, where he once worked as a young man on the original Bonneville.
We start looking at what's going on.
The 900cc engine is said to incorporate radical new features. So closely guarded have its secrets been that most of the design work has been done somewhere on the south coast.
There was the alternator. Now the alternator had to come forward. Now I don't see any problem with that.
This research has been pursued regardless of the cooperative's financial difficulties.
No problem there at all.
The lower one's not too bad. It's up for it's up to come underneath the radiator. And yet we chuck up to the petrol tank.
60 degrees.
Lift at 60.
0.013.
I'll print the next one on the graph, can we, Brian?
With the help of sophisticated computers and sound casting methods once used by the ancient Egyptians, the engine took shape. But with Meriden's future so uncertain, was the effort and expense really worthwhile? Wasn't it ludicrous to expect to create a new bike with no money?
I think everybody who's looked at the situation and who've been prepared to pass a view on long-term viability have all made the same one point, and that is that without the new model there wouldn't be a company, there wouldn't be a future, and really vindicated the membership's dedication to achieving just that.
This then was the heart of what came to be known as Project Diana, in honour of a princess of the same name. But to complete the package, the new engine needed an equally striking new body. The temptation was to turn to some high-profile, high-price outsider. Meriden resisted. It so happened that the local polytechnic boasted the biggest industrial design faculty in the country, and the only one to offer a specialisation in transport design. Students do a spell in the real industrial world during their training, and that was how a young man called Andrew Charters, now aged 22 and studying for an honours degree, arrived on Triumph's doorstep. He came bearing a motorbike frame which he'd made as a school project. The cooperative was impressed. So much so that despite his inexperience, they gave him the job of shaping their future livelihood. They reckoned that Andrew, a bike freak himself, would know better than most what was going to appeal to young customers in the 80s.
That's basically all my work, and I'd like to see it that way. Some people say revolutionary around here. There are many details I'd like to change, like the headlamp cancel. I still haven't worked that out properly, but what I visualise is as soon as we've got this together into model, I'll be able to shape the front as I feel it needs to be. It's too much to cope with trying to draw it out because you can tell lies with drawings. The motorcycle is aimed at trying to make the driver feel confident. As soon as he sits on it, I want an air of confidence set into the person. And what I've tried to do is to make him feel as if he's actually driving in the machine. He's riding in it, so he's actually got a fair amount of shape in front of him.
But a new bike, however good, isn't much use to a bankrupt firm. Once again, at the start of last summer, the coffers were empty, the creditors pressing. The time had come for the cooperative's most desperate play so far. The overlarge Meriden site, symbol of the long struggle, had become a fearful drain on resources. It would have to be sold. But would the workers stand for it? And could a buyer be found for a factory in the depressed West Midlands, designated by the planners for industrial use only?
Our thinking goes along the lines that if we can change that planning permission to something else that enables us to realise the full financial potential and generate £1.5 million, we can reach agreement with the bank to reduce the massive overhead. We can then lease some other premises and move what we need to continue trading. Then we believe that there is long-term viability for this company.
When you really come of age is when you produce that. Because that will say to the whole world at large, that's the proof. We've done it. We've done what we said we set out to do, and there it is. Now, if it means that the site has got to close down to do it, after all you've gone through, I should think you'd only be too happy to do that, knowing that when you come back, you're coming back to a future, and you're coming back to that.
You've got to bear in mind, John, that we've made some rough decisions here, haven't we? You know, we've sent people, put people out of work, haven't we, to keep the place open. We've had some hardships, we've suffered some hardships.
This is Harry Hughes, once a worker director himself, and now a machine shop foreman.
We've reached that stage, we're reaching that stage. I mean, up to here with it, and we've had enough. And I think closure to move would be the last thing. I think that we've got to try and avoid that if we can. But I think there's a limit to what can be tolerated.
That to me is the light at the end of the tunnel. We've still got a way to go to get there, but we have come far enough in 7 years, and I tell you, by hook or by crook, that thing is going to come to life.
I'm impressed, to say the least. Great. Congratulations. More so on your security than anything else. You know? Not even a whisper. If that's the indication of our short time, it's money well spent as far as I'm concerned, Bill. This year. Don't think we're going to be on short time forever to pay for a white elephant. You know, we want to see something at the end of it. That's good.
Roger Bryant is a foreman on the assembly track.
Some people have reached the stage where they cannot afford to be out of work this winter.
Yeah.
Finally, the workers voted to allow the site to be sold. Meanwhile, production of the old Bonnies progressed haphazardly, depending as always on whether there were enough parts to be had from suppliers, who all now expected cash on delivery. Production levels were well below break-even point. And the cooperative had by now sacked its professional managers, which was beginning to look like an act of foolish bravado.
It is very difficult initially to accept the responsibility, but commitment only comes with having total responsibility. And it's certainly our experience that the only time one is totally committed to making things happen is when one has the total responsibility for achieving just that. Without that responsibility, there's always somebody else to blame at the end of the day. We have openly admit that there have been mistakes made. I think there are very few people who've ever done anything that haven't made mistakes.
A commitment is one thing. But the cooperative members, their numbers now reduced to around 200 from a high point of 750, soon learned an important lesson. There's more to management skills than enthusiasm and a sense of common purpose.
We are desperate for further financial expertise, financial director. We have a financial controller who has worked miracles in keeping us alive on a day-to-day basis and will continue to do so in the new environment. But he would accept, and we've had long discussions about it, there is a need for a financial director.
If people can put up with the heartaches and headaches of out here. I mean, look at it. We're in this factory today. There's no heating on. Middle of November. We worked all through last winter, which was a pretty hard one, with no heating on it. These guys were standing working in their overcoats. Come on, where would you get that? And I can't find somebody to bloody back them up with some finance. You look at the finance that's wasted in this country. You got people screaming out here they want to work, they want to make the thing go. So where are all these people with the finance and the cash? Where do they come into? All these banks and institutions and governments and local governments and so on and so forth. Why don't they have a little faith? Instead of giving us hopeful signs that, yes, oh, very good lads, we're interested in what you're doing, you do a wonderful job, your workforce is fantastic, you know, put your money on the table.
Throughout last summer and autumn, the relentless financial pressures built up, and by November it became clear that the company would be swamped by its bills if it wasn't completely restructured. Triumph could survive if the creditors could be persuaded to write off most of their debts, and if the Meriden site could be sold off in favour of something smaller and cheaper. Above all, the now Labour-controlled local authority would have to agree to lend £500,000 to get the factory working again without delay.
We face receivership unless we can come up with a positive reply to our approaches to the West Midlands Enterprise Board. The approaches that started almost 9 months ago. The approaches have taken the form of initially one of trying to secure financial help to enable us to completely restructure the business.
Representatives of the opposition party.
At County Hall, Birmingham, Rosamond and Beattie arrived to hear their fate from the Enterprise Board. It was perhaps the longest 90 minutes either had ever experienced.
I'm personally not prepared to accept defeat, because that's what it would be. All the sacrifice that the people have been prepared to make, the families that have made sacrifice, not just the individuals who work here. It doesn't allow one to think of what's going to happen when the company fails. The company's not going to fail. There is a viable future for it, demonstrated by independent people. We are just looking for the vehicle that enables us to capitalise on what we know is there.
It's frightening.
The County Council Economic Development Committee today approves loans of up to £465,000 to Triumph Motorcycles Meriden Limited. We made this decision in the light of very substantial investigations made into the company by the accountants Price Waterhouse and the consultants Arthur D. Little. From these and from the appraisals done by the officers of the County Council and the Enterprise Board, the County Council believes that Triumph Motorcycles can be made into a viable exporting company in the short term. And in the longer term, the County Council believes the company's position as the last UK manufacturer of motorcycles can and should be secured.
True to the Triumph tradition, John Rosamond returned to the factory to show his colleagues the silver lining and the cloud lurking inside.
And I think most of you know it. 9th of November is 9 years to the day when the company, the old company, Triumph Engineering, closed. Now, most of you were present at that time, I know. And most of you initially felt that you'd witnessed the end of Triumph. However, I'm extremely pleased today to be able to tell you that 9th of November 1982 represents the beginning. We have achieved what the negotiations have been about. Now actually implementing those achievements are the next step. It's going to take a little time before we can get the company ticking again. Now, we've just had a short board meeting and discussed this with your directors, and obviously the position is we have to find out a lot more of exactly how we start production again, because I think we all recognise that the factory is almost bare. Now, to that end, we're going to have to lay the company off for a short period of time, and what we will be saying to you is we will call another meeting for Tuesday of next week, when hopefully we will have some further news on exactly what it means. Now, that's difficult enough. There will be certain individuals who will have to continue to work voluntary, so they won't be being paid, just to go into the details of this and be able to implement it as soon as we possibly can.
I'm rather pleased at the news, I think we all are. But the implications of it is what we're concerned about. Does that mean, in effect, that we're laid off as from today?
What we're talking about, Harry, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. We would have to ask your forbearance to play along with us. You know, we don't want people sat at home. We want to get on with implementing the good news that we've got for you today.
For God's sake, don't lose sight of the fact. Today we could have been all going down the road for the last time. We're not. We're here with a chance of securing the future of the company, and that's what you want to keep your minds on and keep them trained to that. And I don't know how many other people can say that at this time, and the recession is going up and down this country, where you're reading about redundancies every day of the week in the press. We have got to deliver the goods, and we have got to run this company in as business-like a manner as we possibly can. So come on, lads, it's in our hands. Let's face up to it and let's do the things that need to be done. No matter how unpalatable it may seem, I know you can do it, and we will do it.
Thank you, Bill. Is there a mover for that proposition? Roger's moving that the layoff should take place as of today, a recall meeting next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Is there a seconder for that proposition? All in favour of the proposition, please show. Against? That is unanimously carried, I'm pleased to say. Can I thank you for your attendance of the meeting and declare the meeting closed?
So the members wandered off disconsolately to further enforced idleness. Until the £500,000 came through from the West Midlands, they couldn't afford the parts to build another bike.
I'll get that information to you as soon as I can.
An international sales manager, Nigel Usher, once with BMW, has to go on selling a product he hasn't got to customers whose patience has already been severely tested.
Let me know as soon as you thought you've got the number on the back there at 4 o'clock. Right? Thanks, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
The irony is that Usher can't even make use of the sensational free publicity provided by the box office success An Officer and a Gentleman, which does for Triumph bikes what Herbie did for Volkswagens.
Yes, sir! I don't believe what I'm seeing. Where you been all you lied? Which one of you, boy? I don't see no horns, so you must be queer. No, sir! What? No, sir! I expect you to happen, so I'm finished.
All the time, the new year was approaching with its moment of truth. Diana's debut in front of stern critics. How would she perform? The relief is writ large on Rosamond's face. Meriden may be on its knees, but Diana is alive and kicking. Rosamond and Beattie have something positive to show the local politicians on whom their future increasingly depends. For the local authority has been studying Triumph's new 5-year plan, which suggests that £1.5 million will be needed to rebuild the company around the Diana. By now, the West Midlands' original £500,000 has been released and work on the Bonnie has been restarted. A little time has been bought to pursue the restructuring plan. Creditors must be wooed, sites bought and sold. The breathing space is all too short. By late January, the money runs out. The factory closes. So all negotiations become more urgent than ever. Within a few days, Beattie is on his way to an old Dunlop factory, which he hopes will be the cooperative's new home.
We've got a bar for the Meriden site. We've got acceptance from Dunlop of an offer we made to them for their site. At the moment, Dunlop, they're talking with our solicitors and they change the title. But Dunlop have allowed our personnel to have access to the site because we want to start some preparatory work there for when we actually physically move the plant. If you like, what's happening now is a continuing act of faith by the people of Meriden to secure the future for the Triumph motorcycle. Asking them to volunteer their services for nothing. They won't be paid for it. They're let off work at the moment. So they'll be going in to clean the factory up, wash down the walls, scrape the floors, put a fresh lick of paint on it, because, like I say, the act of faith is that's where we're going to be working in the future.
Beattie had asked for 20 unpaid volunteers to help clean up the factory. 38 turned up.
That's how we intend to lay the place out. Yeah. That's the loading dock over there. That's where the tracks, rectification, dispatch, and that will be. It's your machine shop area along here. Right. There's a covered way on the other side of that wall. Canteen, which is going to become a frame shop. That at the end will become a frame shop. That's where you are, somebody. So that's where you'll be cleaning first. That's over in that corner over there.
Well, there's other investors and such people as the West Midlands prepared to back us. We've got to do these sort of things.
I can see a future in the Triumph. I reckon it's going to succeed. It's the only English bike left. So you've got to keep something like that going. I believe in the Triumph.
We're going to make the Triumph the best bike in the world again.
And we're trying to achieve a lot. And we will achieve, with the attitude here at Meriden, we will achieve, in the end, our ultimate end, and we'll succeed.
Well, I can't ever see anybody going back to manufacturing.
The men's confidence is boosted by the knowledge that restructuring discussions with creditors and bankers are going well.
We work on that section because you've got a lot of it part machine, don't you?
That's right.
But the news isn't all good, of course. Production in their new home will be a desperately tight squeeze. And the continuing layoffs are causing a build-up of frustration, which flares up at the idea that some machine shop work may in future be subcontracted.
So you're going to run 2 tracks instead of 1. So your assembly area will grow, your machine shop area will decrease.
the jobs will decrease at the same time.
No, because the jobs will not decrease. What will happen is that people on those areas now will move over into the assembly areas, or maybe move into the smaller machine shop areas.
What bothers me, Bill, you know,
Because
because every job you put outside, it means that you're dependent on your future ain't in your own hands. And it's less, and the more and more work outside, the less and less have you got your future in your own hands.
You either get it in here, or you go on a day.
Well, yeah. You know, that's it. Alec, I'm sick. And I ain't getting on to you, Alec, but I'm sick of being told, and Bill said it and John Rossman said it, do this or else. Do this or else.
I know
I'm bloody
you've
sick
heard
of
it lots
it.
of times, and I've heard it since I've been.
And I'll get to the stage, Alec, where I think the bloody dole is probably better than this.
Well, you know,
I don't know, that's not why you're here.
I feel sick about it. No, but you get round off of do this or else.
Well, I'm afraid this
But you keep and I think there ought to be a bloody time where we ought to talk these things out and let the shop floor have a say on what's going to happen and where we're going to do and what's going to come in and what's going to go outside. Because we've worked here a long time, you know. A lot of people here worked here a bloody long time. And we know the place, we know the parts that we've got to make, and we can help, can't we? We ain't here to bloody end it, we're here to help.
Of course you are.
We ain't consulted in a good many instances.
That's exactly why we're all here today, Harry. That's why we've had all these various meetings at Meriden. You see, John and I are not saying to anybody, you do this or else. I mean, that's what we're faced with. We don't have a choice in the matter. How often have we ever had the luxury of being able to make a decision off our own bat without having something else dictating what we do? We've never had that luxury. What we're hoping to achieve is, if we squeeze into this plant, I grant you it's tight, if we squeeze into this plant, and we feel we can, if we can turn the business around on this site, which we can't do at Meriden, because the overhead, the fixed overheads are, I mean, they're overpowering as far as we're concerned. They're just draining all the capital that we've ever been able to raise. On this side, hopefully we cut those overheads, especially the bank borrowing rates and other things, that are, I mean, interest rates were pretty high at the time there, and get at least a break even in the first operational year on this site, something we've never been able to do at Meriden. And with the range of models following it up, get into the black for a change, because the first time we get into the black will be the first time that we have proved our point, not just to ourselves, but to the outside world.
In March, the outside world foregathered for motorcycling's international showcase at the exhibition centre in Birmingham. Almost a home fixture for Triumph, but dominated by the Germans, the Italians, and of course the Japanese. Right at the centre of the hall is Triumph's homemade stand, but they know they might as well be exhibiting in an industrial museum unless production starts again soon, and unless they can raise the funds to launch the Diana on show here for the first time. What makes them think they deserve a further huge investment?
We've earned it, certainly. We've sold the existing 22-acre Meriden site at a figure that enables us to satisfy the preferential creditors and the non-preferential creditors. And also, we've made an offer for a further site that's been accepted. We're now in a position to start the company up anew and have a real chance of success.
We must be the only people at this motorcycle show that have got a workforce that is laid off, and there is no bikes being produced at the factory.
Triumph believe that without exotic assistance, they can quickly build up production levels to 90 bikes a week, which is said to be break-even point, and beyond. But it won't be easy. The world's top manufacturers are using every trick in the book to attract customers in a contracting world market. Triumph hope that their Diana, in stately seclusion on the roof of their stand, will eventually prove her innate class and breeding. But it can't happen without the good offices of Councillor Jeff Edge.
Well, the West Midlands County Council and the West Midlands Enterprise Board are looking at helping to refinance Meriden. It is a very major job, and we are going to need very substantial private sector investment in addition to anything that we might put in. And I think we're talking about investors who are willing to come in with as much as $500,000, and perhaps we need several investors of that size.
And so, in sight of the finishing post, the Meriden men find themselves confronted with yet another hurdle, the city. Michael Jordan is a new actor in the Meriden saga, but his is far from being a bit part. He's senior partner in the London accountants Cork Gully. To him has fallen the task of discovering whether there really might be private funds available to the cooperative for the first time in 10 years.
Well, from my discussions with them, my feeling is that they need considerable help on aspects of management, in particular their production, also on their marketing side, not forgetting the financial side of running a business such as France, where cash flow is absolutely vital. I think beyond that, there are some encouraging signs. In North America, which is one of their principal markets, trade or business there is improving, and I think also helped by the exchange rate between the dollar at the present time, there's every chance that they ought to be able to succeed with a sales program there. France, of course, has its own charisma. It has a cult following, and I think if the financial package can be put together, then I think there's a very good chance that they should achieve their overseas sales plans. I think the city, in fact, will be able to put up the sort of money that the West Midlands Enterprise Board are hoping for to bridge the gap. And I think that is possible by putting up the money for the overseas sales and financing those. In addition, I think the Chancellor's proposals, which he made recently, to extend the business startup scheme could be of great interest in helping to put the money together.
We've got this down. We got this bike into this show where people said we wouldn't get it into the show, and we're proud that we're still flying the flag, and that's British. And as British, we're going to fight it out until we get a successful conclusion. And this bike, we feel will do.